Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Yesterday, a big day down in Austin when it came to property tax reform. The House moving out property tax reform. And joining us on the phones right now to talk about the entire process, a guy who's been working very, very hard down in Austin. It's Chairman Dustin Burrows joining us here on the Chad Hasty Show. Chairman Burrows, welcome to the show, and congratulations on moving the bill yesterday.
Chad, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It was a big day for Texas taxpayers. We have not had a major overhaul of the property tax code or reforming it since the 70s. And so we have made a monumental progress towards getting that accomplished this year. And I was very proud to work with Senator Betancourt, who brought the bill, sponsor it in the House, to have the support of so many of my colleagues, the governor, the Speaker of the House, and to move this forward yesterday in the Texas House.
Well, talk about the bill a little bit. And yesterday, when I was watching this play out on the House floor, something that you had said numerous times, and a lot of folks on social media picked up on it, is that this is reform, this is transparency of property taxes, something you've talked about this entire time, by the way, that this is reform, this is transparency, but it's not necessarily relief, correct?
Yeah, so absolutely, Chad. I mean, this bill is designed to do two major things. I mean, we hear from taxpayers all the time. I'm one of them. They're frustrated by rising property taxes, confused by the process, and we heard testimony. People are scared of losing their house when that big property tax bill comes. And, what this bill does is it sheds light on who is raising our taxes, by how much in dollars and cents, tells them how to actually get engaged, where to go to, and make sure their voice is heard. So there's a lot of really great elements of this bill. But, the one thing that's, not really a misperception, or could be, I've tried not to create it, is, this does not automatically lower anyone's property tax bill. And it's not designed to. And to say that, it's going to, I just want to make sure the record's clear on that.
So what to you, I know you've talked about the transparency part of this, that you love that part. It shows a lot of transparency. Talk about that more in detail.
Yeah.
What will if this gets all the way through the governor's desk and he signs off on it? What does this mean moving forward for property tax bills?
Yeah, let me tell you why I love that element of it. It's really getting people engaged because all the time people realize year after year their property taxes are going up, and they go see their mayor, they go see their county people, and they say, well, my taxes are going up. You raised my taxes. And they say, no, we didn't raise your taxes. And, of course, they're referring to the tax rate. What this bill does is it shows you how much more money they're getting from you year after year, and tells you how to get involved in the meeting. And so you can go have a conversation and say, hey, mayors, judges, why did you need more money from me? And have that conversation and let people actually understand, was it just a new cost? Was there some new things that we needed to do? And actually start that dialogue. It also has a rollback rate on it that says, if taxes are going to go up over a certain percentage in a given year, over a rollback rate, there needs to be an election. It gives us more control. I think it's going to force local governments to prioritize needs versus wants and let people have some a little more control and a little more of a vote, an automatic vote, which we all deserve, over those. So,
okay, that trigger cap, whatever people want to call it, for counties and cities, it's at what, 3.5%? Is that
3.5%, same as the Senate?
Okay, and for schools, now this has been another part that's been confusing for folks. In your original bill, you had school districts at, I believe, 2.5%, and then at one point, school districts were pulled out, and now they're back in it. But as you explained yesterday, it doesn't matter if they're in it. Explain that.
Okay, so we have two property tax systems in the state of Texas by statute, right? There's two different statutes that deal with property taxes. You have the property tax code for almost every single taxing jurisdiction. Then you have the education code for school system. And that's just because that's where we've done school finance for them. It's been built up, over years and years and years. And so if you want to put a cap on the growth or anything, to deal with school finance reform. It needs to be in the education code. That's kind of just a procedural thing. It's not really a substantive debate. And so when the bills were filed, we wanted to make sure that all Texans knew that we were committed to reforming property taxes, not just on the city and county side, but also on the school side. So we put some placeholder language in there. Well, the lawyer in me, not the politician, said, well, let's just move it over to the education code. And people got concerned that maybe the Texas House wasn't as committed to making sure that we did a complete overhaul of both systems. The Senate decided to keep it in there. I think that largely they wanted to make sure that Texans understood that. And so we put it back in to make sure everyone knows we're completely committed. In fact, I didn't stick at 2.5. I went down to 2 because the House is completely committed to having a reform of both sides of that ledger.
So, and this is connected to school finance reform in HB 3. And you said, I believe it was you who said yesterday, one cannot pass without the other. Is that correct?
So the bill actually does that. I mean, you cannot do comprehensive property tax reform unless you do both sides of the ledger, unless you deal with both cities and counties and you deal with schools. And because you've got to do school finance reform in the education code, which is House Bill 3, I've tied the two together so they both are going to pass. I think all Texans, this entire body, are committed to doing both comprehensive property tax reform and schools finance reform. This session is expected of us, and I fully intend to go home and say that we did both. We're
visiting with Chairman Dustin Burrows here on the Chad Hasty Show. When it comes to school finance reform and the two being connected, do you worry about, and this has been talked about, I know, on the Senate side and a little bit on the House side, and everyone's talked about it, the sales tax increase. Is that going to be connected to the education bill?
Well, we don't have control over the education bill. That's on the Senate side. To be honest with you, I haven't been paying attention to what they're doing. Certainly, from my mind, I never have people come to see me and complain about the sales tax being too high. They get to pay it, in small times throughout the year. But when people talk about property taxes, and of course it's connected to their home, which those prices they have less control over, that's really concerning and alarming to them. So if you're talking about preferences, if you're talking about ways of actually funding things, the consumption tax, in my mind, is a much better way to do it. And we are actively looking at, dollar for dollar reducing property taxes by utilizing consumption tax. But are they tied together? Not necessarily.
Okay. How has your relationship been with Senator Bettencourt? Obviously, y'all both been working on property tax relief. He in the Senate, you in the House. How's that relationship, and what do you expect that relationship to look like moving forward as now this goes into conference?
No, it's very good. I want to pay Senator Bettencourt a compliment. He's worked for a very, very long time on trying to deliver, this bill and meaningful property tax reform. It was, I'm glad I got to carry, his bill in the House yesterday and, continue to communicate and, definitely respect him and look forward to continuing to working with him on this as we close out session and hopefully other projects.
Chairman Burrows, let me ask you this because this is something that I think a lot of people are still going to ask about, and you may already be getting these questions just from constituents who have come and seen you down in Austin. We've got the reform now. We can check that box. We got the reform as long as the governor signs off on it. We've got the reform. Where does relief come in?
Well, first off, we still have to go to conference. The work is not done on reform. There are, some differences between the House and Senate, although I think we're very close. And so we've actually got to get that across the goal line. That was my priority when I came in and was Ways and Means Chair. And so I'm going to make sure that we don't, lose sight of making sure that gets delivered across it because I think it's a fundamental change and, again, has not been done, since the 70s.
Sure.
Continuing to look at different sources of revenue to buy down property taxes. I think it's important. And I, again, of course, I support using consumption taxes to do that. But, I want to make sure that people have meaningful relief if we're going to go that route.
Do you think if your reform gets through, okay, if it gets through conference, it gets to the governor's desk, he signs off on it, if at the end of the session there's not relief for taxpayers from other pieces of legislation or a sales tax increase that buys down property taxes, however this looks, if there's not relief at the end of the session, do you think Republican voters and do you think voters across the state will be disappointed?
Look, Matt, Chad, we have focused on this reform bill last session. We could not get this done in the House. We barely got it done at 6%. This has been a very challenging legislative process to get this through, and I think this is a significant victory for conservatives and taxpayers across Texas. Of course, we want to always do more. We've got 30 days left, so I'm going to do everything I can to deliver as much as I can to the taxpayers of Texas and West Texas and Lubbock.
All right. Chair Burrows, appreciate your time today. Congratulations on the passage yesterday. I know the governor and lieutenant governor and the speaker have all congratulated you, and I'm sure it's you've got it's less than 30 days left in the legislature. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty busy time for you. We appreciate you, as always, joining us.
Thank you.
That's Dustin Burrows, Representative Dustin Burrows here on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. We'll be right back.